The 1-hour Week in Review program will exhibit experts and commentators to look back on the news of the past 7 days and break down stories and issues across Africa that everyone is talking about. Africa This Week will feature Guest of the Week and engage people at the center of every key news, every story in the best interactive, entertaining and informative way possible. Africa This Week on Home Digital FM 99.9 every Saturday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. starting from next Saturday, October 22nd. Africa This Week with me, BOJANG Jr. See you there. Hello and a very warm welcome to your Week in Review program Africa This Week, looking at the continent's top stories over the last 7 days. Coming up in this edition, Gambian government gave details of what it said was a plot to overthrow the Barrow administration.
Also, the reports are pointing to the suspected involvement of sponsors for the coup plot from civilian collaborators who are both within and outside of the country.
Gambian opposition activist Mamadou Sabali released from detention 9 days after he was arrested and held in police custody. We'll hear from his lawyer as well as his son, who paid tribute to his father's conviction and resolve to fight for political participation of all Gambians.
I know my father, and anyone who knows my father understands you cannot intimidate that man. He will come out eventually because this is a charade with a lot more things to say, and he will more passionately, more fiercely, and more vigorously defend the dignity and freedom of Gambians.
After more than a decade of legal battle, oil giant Shell said it would pay 15 million euros in compensation to Nigerian farmers for oil spills that severely polluted 3 villages in the Niger Delta. We'll hear from a barrister who represented some of the Nigerian communities in court. Nigeria's President Buhari urged his country's military and other security agencies to remain apolitical in their involvement in the provision of security during next year's general elections. And Senegal's main opposition coalition called on its supporters to take part in another round of noisy protest by banging kitchen pots and pans on New Year's Eve to denounce alleged mismanagement of COVID funds in the country. Elsewhere on the continent, Zambia repealed the controversial colonial-era defamation law that has been used in the past to silence government critics. And in our human interest segment, we explore why more and more young Gambian Muslim women are going hijab.
I started wearing the veil simply because I feel it is an obligation on me as a Muslim lady.
I was wearing any other thing like trousers, short skirts and stuff, but now alhamdulillah.
Also coming up, our special guest, a Gambian businessman who turned a cocoa seedling gift into the first made in the Gambia chocolate bar.
It took me 2.5 years for someone to finally say, can I have one more? You know, and that was the turning point for me. It was, I got to a level of a chocolate that was really enjoyed by people to the point where they wanted more. And that in business, you know, in entrepreneurship is key when your customers want more of your product.
These plus sports and more in today's program. Stay with us.
Africa This Week, coming to you from Home Digital 99.9 FM in the heart of Rikama.
Sheriff BOJANG Jr.
Thanks for joining us. We start at home in the Gambia, where the government Thursday gave details of what it said was a plot to overthrow the government of Adama Barrow. Last week, Wednesday, the authorities in a written statement announced that there was a coup plot to overthrow the government and that 4 soldiers were arrested. An updated statement that was issued later announced the arrest of 2 more soldiers, though it did not give any details. But in a press briefing at the Gambia Armed Forces headquarters in Banjul Thursday, the newly appointed National Security Advisor Abubakar Suleiman Jeng said the alleged coup plotters made contacts and held what he called clandestine meetings within the country. He also alleged the civilian involvement. The government's claims came 48 hours after it announced it has instituted a panel to investigate the alleged coup plot.
It has been established that the alleged coup plotters made contacts and held clandestine meetings in some places identified within the country as they were planning the unearthed coup plot. Also, reports are pointing to the suspected involvement of sponsors for the coup plot from civilian collaborators who are both within and outside of the country. The investigations are seriously looking into this angle. In addition, an operational plan of the alleged plot detailing the outline of the botched plot is already in the hands of the investigators. The said plan shows the composition of the formation that were to be participate, the required deployment, strength, tasking, and positioning to forcefully take over the State House and prevent any intervention. The Gambian naval base in Banjul was identified to be the launching platform with accomplices from the State Guard, Fajara Barracks, Yundum Barracks, and other battalions across the country.
The Gambia's new National Security Advisor, Abubakar Suleiman Jeng. I must say that we cannot independently confirm or verify any of the allegations he made. Still in the Gambia, the police on Friday unconditionally released Momodu Sabali, the campaign manager of the main opposition United Democratic Party and fierce critic of the Barrow administration, 9 days after detaining him in custody. Sabali was arrested on December 21st over a statement he made during a meeting with young supporters of his party. For more on his release, here is his lawyer, Abdullahi Fatih.
Sabali has been unconditionally released, and it means there are no conditions attached to his release, as opposed to a conditional release where he may have been required or would have been required to probably report to the police as and when required. But this is unconditional, which means he's free to go home, and that is the end of the matter.
His unconditional release came just a few days after the High Court judge granted permission to the police to extend his detention. Have you been told why he's been released all of a sudden?
No, but it wasn't unexpected, because I think there was mounting pressure on government. I think this whole saga escalated and became toxic. And the longer Sabali remained in detention, the more toxic it became. And I believe at some point, I think government really wanted to probably bring an end to this. That is one. But secondly, he didn't commit any crime. Apart from Sabali not committing any crime whatsoever, but I know that Supreme Islamic Council intervened. There was a meeting in Banjul and Sabali was invited. And I think the Supreme Islamic Council intervened to broker peace. The pressure was too much. Even people who disagree with Sabali, even people that politically are at opposite ends with Sabali, but on this occasion they believed that he was unfairly treated and that perhaps his detention was politically motivated.
And Anablai, legally, as far as your representation of him is concerned, where do you go from here?
There is an application pending in court. We'll have to address that, one. But secondly, there are more serious, more fundamental issues. The law that was relied on by the Attorney General, a practice direction to curtail and express constitutional provision, So this happened in the General Sol Baji and the others case. This happened in the Sabali case. It is likely to happen again. So we're likely to challenge the constitutionality of this provision, because you cannot have, this is not even primary statute. This is some form of secondary legislation. So you may even argue that it has a force and effect of law, that it is very, very secondary. Perhaps you can argue that this is just some form of administrative instrument of some sort. So to rely on that, to restrict and express constitutional right under Chapter 4 of a person, it's a very serious issue. So we may have to go to court and seek a declaration so that this practice direction is struck down. That is one. I was denied access to Sabali Thursday. Again, that is a constitutional right. It's a common law right. So we may again have to seek redress from the High Court. That I believe is a blatant infringement and a violation of his constitutional right, because the law is clear. When someone is arrested, the police or whoever is responsible for arresting that individual, you explain to them in a language that they understand and the reason why they've been arrested. And as reasonably as possible, immediately the request for a lawyer you provide.
Abdullahi Fati, a lawyer representing Momodu Sabali, a Gambian opposition activist and fierce critic of the Adama Barrow administration. I do apologize for my son's background noise in the interview. Well, Sabali was released a few days after a vacation judge, Justice Nguimbo, granted permission for the police to extend his detention to January 5th, beyond the 72-hour constitutional requirement. Meanwhile, Sabali's first son, Mohammed Sabali, based in the US, has spoken out against what he called the campaign by the state to silence his father. In this interview, Mohammed talked about Sabali's faith, mental strength, why he can't be silenced, and his wife's role as the pillar of the family.
The Barrow government wants to intimidate and silence its most outspoken and strongest critic. But I know my father, and anyone who knows my father understands, you cannot intimidate that man. He will come out eventually, because this is a charade, with a lot more things to say, and he will more passionately, more fiercely, and more vigorously defend the dignity and freedom of Gambians. My father is very big on faith and having faith, particularly in times like this, in times of great uncertainty and in times of difficulty. He's always cheerful, that man. He's always smiling and laughing his deep, sonorous laugh. And I know his faith in the new Gambia, in the spirit of new Gambia, his faith in the struggle for democracy, in the eventual triumph of democracy and freedom, I think is stronger than ever before.
Mohammed, before his arrest, he was barred from taking public employment, public office, despite the fact that others recommended for ban by the Janet Commission continue to work at very senior positions and very close to President Adama Barrow in his cabinet. When Sabali also tried to get nominated for last parliamentary election, his application was rejected. How does that make you feel, the fact that he has been a target for this government?
When the Gambians removed the dictatorship and established a new government, we all hoped, we all sincerely believed that the days of arbitrary arrest, of targeting your opponents, of violating the rights of people who you merely dislike, we thought those days would be behind us. And it is awfully frightening and awfully scary that for the past 5 years, this government has targeted my father. And I think what this is about ultimately is the sort of Gambia we want. This struggle is beyond what's happening to my father. It is about whether we treat each citizen fairly. I think what's scary about this, we have a government that was here to establish the rule of law, to establish the right to political freedom. And now we have the same government who is now starting to undermine this project by attacking the very principles it has sworn to protect. This is a betrayal of Gambians. I think this is what it is ultimately.
And your father is loved. But of course, August, he's also hated by so many people. You must have been reading all the stuff people are writing about him, especially on the social media. Is your father misunderstood or judged wrongly?
Firstly, I would like to begin by answering that question by expressing my gratitude and thanking all the people who have shown support and who are standing in solidarity with my father, people who've reached out to my family, the people who are posting on social media, who are saying, I am sorry, the people who are writing articles. My family and I are greatly touched and appreciate the tireless care, devotion, and commitment shown by Gambians to my father in the past week. However, it is true that because he is a very energetic personality, because he is very, very unapologetically full of conviction, that can come across to people as he's often accused of being arrogant. But I know my father. He's the most tolerant person I know. He and I, even he and I don't share the same beliefs, and often we have very different political values. And he is always open, willing to hear my side of the story. And I know that anyone who's close to him knows this to be true. Though he can't, I think what people tend to find uncomfortable about him is how full of conviction he is. But I think this is what makes him who he is. And though he's full of conviction, he's still tolerant, and he's always willing to listen to the other side of this, other people's side of the story.
And Mohammed, we've seen your stepmom, Jaisar, on Kerfadu in an interview talking about your father and trying very hard to conceal her emotions, her tears, and stay strong, I guess, for the kids at home. How did that make you feel?
Over the past decade, this woman has had to take care of over 6 kids, and on top of that had her own job to do, and on top of that had to take care of my father, always going to give him lunch, always going to check up on him whenever he was in detention. I cannot imagine what she has had to experience, the stress, the sadness. And it's so hard for me to talk about this because I have been a witness to this for the past decade. I have seen her show immense patience and courage in the face of unjust adversity. And one of the things it has done for me, that watching her do all this for my father, it has made me a deeper believer in love and the inexhaustible capacity to care for other people. And though she has been through a lot, Auntie Jay is a very, very strong woman. And I know she will always find a way to rise above all this.
Mohamed Sabali, son of Gambian opposition activist and fierce critic of the Barrow administration, Mamadou Sabali. From the Gambia to Mali, where the trial of 46 Ivorian soldiers suspected of being mercenaries and detained in the country since July on Thursday began at the Court of Appeal in Bamako. Their appearance comes in the run-up to a January 1st deadline set by West African leaders for Mali to release the troops or face more sanctions. The Ivorian soldiers were arrested in Mali on July 10th and charged in mid-August with attempting to undermine the external security of the state. Ivory Coast and the UN said the troops were flown to provide routine backup security for the German contingent of the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali, MINUSMA. A court in Ivory Coast on Wednesday handed down life sentence to 4 Malian men convicted of abetting a jihadi attack on a beach resort in the Ivorian capital that left 19 people dead. The March 2016 assault was the first jihadist attack in Ivory Coast, one of West Africa's economic powerhouses. In an operation echoing a jihadi massacre the previous year in Tunisia, 3 men wielding assault rifles stormed the beach of Grand Bassam, a resort 40 kilometers east of Abidjan, popular with Europeans, before attacking hotels and restaurants. The 45-minute bloodbath ended when Ivorian security forces shot the attackers dead. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has criticized Burkina Faso for expelling a senior UN official from the country, saying that they had no authority to do so. Burkinabe authorities last week Friday ordered the Italian diplomat Barbara Manzi, the United Nations resident coordinator in Burkina Faso, to leave the country after declaring her persona non grata. The Foreign Minister Olivia Ruamba said Manzi's decision to unilaterally withdraw non-essential UN staff from the capital Ouagadougou justified the move to expel her. She told the national television that the withdrawal discredited and tarnished the image of Burkina Faso and put off potential investors. According to the minister, Manzi had predicted chaos in Burkina Faso in the coming months, adding that the United Nations should act as a support structure as the country battled a bloody jihadist insurgency. In response to the expulsion, the UN Chief Guterres expressed confidence in Manzi, the most senior UN official in Burkina Faso. He said UN staff members have the right to remain in Burkina Faso in order to perform their functions on behalf of the organization, and that only the UN Secretary General, as the Chief Administrative Officer of the organization, has the authority to withdraw any United Nations official. He also reiterated the commitment of the UN to continue to engage with the transitional authorities in Burkina Faso and to support the country and its people. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has urged his country's military and other security agencies to remain apolitical in their involvement in the provision of security during next year's general elections. Buhari made the call at the inauguration of the Defense Intelligence Agency estate in Abuja.
Let me reiterate, as we approach our general election in 2023, security agencies will be engaged with various support and assistance in the elections, particularly with distribution and monitoring of classified materials and other logistics. This must be done professionally and in accordance with standard operation procedures. I therefore urge you to remain apolitical and desist from behavior that could bring disrepute to the agency and our country by compromising the democratic process.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari. After more than a decade of a legal battle, oil giant Shell has decided to pay 15 million euros in compensation to Nigerian farmers for oil spills that severely polluted 3 villages in the Niger Delta. A Dutch court ruled in 2021 that Shell's Nigerian subsidiary was liable for damages resulting from the spills and ordered Shell to pay compensation in the long-running lawsuit brought by 4 Nigerian farmers. In a statement, the British oil giant said it has negotiated a settlement with Dutch environmental organization Milieudefensie for the benefit of the communities of Oruma, Goi, and Ikot Ada Udo in Nigeria, which were impacted by 4 oil spills between 2004 and 2007. Shell said it will settle all claims and end all pending litigation related to the spills. Supported by Milieudefensie, 4 Nigerian farmers and fishermen had taken the case to the Dutch courts in 2008, demanding that Shell, whose headquarters were then in The Hague, pay for the cleanup work and pay them compensation. Barrister Prince Chima Williams, the winner of 2022 prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize and the executive director of Environmental Rights Action and Friends of the Earth Nigeria, served as a lawyer for some of the communities that took Shell to court. He spoke to me about the compensation agreement.
This is positive because apart from the monetary compensation that will come to the people, the victims, there is also victory for environmental justice campaigners in terms of safeguarding the environment for the future through the installation of the leak detection system. And of course, the third victory here is victory for Shell itself, because if they behave sincerely and honestly in this process, it can be an opportunity for them to begin to behave more corporately responsible in the future and in their operations, and that will put them ahead of other companies or other corporations that are still misbehaving. Okay, so in that, if Shell can behave well, as we've always said it, we foresee a situation whereby the other smaller multinationals will follow suit. including the national domestic operators, will follow suit.
And Barrister, despite making this compensation, paying this 15 million euro compensation, Cell said this could not be seen as an admission of liability. Do you have a problem with that?
Well, the issue here is very simple. Shell is not a Father Christmas. That we must know. And no corporation is a Father Christmas. To dole out 15 million euros in compensation in settlements to victims, what are they settling? If no matter the term they use on non-admission basis, yes, that is their term, because we are settling, because we are in a settlement. In a settlement, gives a win-win situation, give and take. But in terms of what grounded the settlement in the first place, there is a court of appeal judgment that had ordered for payment of compensation. So if we are negotiating and we have negotiated to settle, and then an agreement is reached, whatever terminology is used, it is very clear the foundation of that settlement and the acceptance to pay.
Nigerian barrister Prince Chima Williams. In Togo, a new decree has named President Fonya Simbe as the new Minister of the Armed Forces as part of a reshuffle amid growing security concerns in the northern regions. Until this year, Togo had been spared the frequent Islamist violence that has spread across most of West Africa over the past decade, including into its northern neighbor Burkina Faso. Under the presidential decree read by a spokesperson on national television, the Ministry of the Armed Forces will become part of the presidency. The Minister of the Armed Forces, Marguerite Nyakade, has stepped down, while the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Brigadier General Jaja Maganawe, has been replaced by Air Brigadier General Tasunti Jato. Senegal's main opposition coalition, Yewi Askanwi, has called on its supporters to take part in another round of noisy protest by banging kitchen pots and pans on New Year's Eve to denounce alleged mismanagement of the country's COVID funds. Senegal's Court of Auditors earlier this month asked the Ministry of Justice to open a judicial investigation against at least 10 people, including officials from the ministries involved in the management of the anti-COVID-19 funds. The court raised concerns over the 2020 and 2021 anti-COVID expenditures amounting to more than 740 billion CFA francs, or more than 1.1 billion euros, financed by donors and the state. In a report, the auditor said the total amount of expenditures made by various ministries are not related to COVID-19 amounts to about 30 million euros. These include an overbilling of more than 2.7 billion CFA francs, or 4 million euros, on the price of rice purchased and distributed to the poorest populations in a context of confinement, and several defects in supporting documents for expenditures. In response to this report, the main opposition coalition held a press conference in Dakar on Thursday, asking its supporters to come to their windows, balconies, and doorways and bang on pots and pans. The same time, President Macky Sall is expected to deliver his annual televised New Year's message. The idea, according to the party, is to express anger at the reported corruption and mismanagement over COVID funds and to push for accountability and transparency. It would be recalled that the opposition party, led by Ousmane Sonko, organized a similar protest in June ahead of the legislative elections. You are listening to Africa This Week on Home Digital with me, Serif Bojang Jr. A reminder of our top stories. Gambian government gave details of what it said was a plot to overthrow the Barrow administration. Gambian opposition activist Momodou Sabali released from detention 9 days after he was arrested and held in police custody. And after more than a decade of a legal battle, oil giant Shell said it would pay 15 million euros in compensation to Nigerian farmers for oil spills that severely polluted 3 villages in the Niger Delta. Still ahead in the program, the death toll from a South Africa gas tanker blast in Johannesburg on Christmas Eve climbed to 27. We also have our human interest and special guest segment, plus sports and more. Stay with us.
Africa This Week, coming to you from Home Digital 99.9 FM in the heart of Rikama.
Now to Ethiopia, where authorities have released the final aircraft accident investigation report on a plane that crashed more than 3 years ago. In March 2019, Ethiopia's flight ET302 Boeing 737-8 MAX aircraft flying to the Kenyan capital Nairobi crashed, killing all 157 people on board from 35 different countries. The plane went down 6 minutes after takeoff. The plane's manufacturer, Boeing, at the time questioned the qualification of the pilots, but Ethiopia's investigators argued that all the crew were licensed, certified, and qualified to operate the aircraft under Ethiopian Civil Aviation Authority standards. Ethiopia's Transport and Communications Minister, Dagmawit Moges, said at a press conference in Addis Ababa that the plane's angle of attack sensor failed immediately after takeoff. The head of Ethiopia's investigation, Amdei Ayalew, also addressed the press conference. First is the minister.
The airplane's left angle of attack, or AOA, sensor failed immediately after takeoff, sending faulty data to the flight control system. The erroneous data in turn triggered the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS, which repeatedly pitched the nose of the airplane down to the point the pilots lost control.
During our investigations, the data's informations were collected from FAA, Boeing, Ethiopian Airlines, and Ethiopian Civil Aviation Authority. From this, we have found that Boeing has never discussed about AOS sensor electrical design error publicly, did not inform the AIB about this error either. The error of omission is that Boeing failed to disclose early and attentively the existence of MCAS to the operators.
Amdei Ayalew, head of Ethiopia's investigation into the March 2019 plane crash that killed all the 157 people on board. First, you heard from Ethiopia's Transport and Communications Minister, Dagmawit Moges. The Zambian government has repealed a controversial colonial-era defamation law that has been used in the past to silence government critics. President Hakainde Hichilema announced the repeal last weekend. In a statement, he also announced the repeal of the death penalty. Zambia's last execution took place in 1997, but some 250 people were still on death row as of 2021, including 9 people newly sentenced, according to a VOA report. Critics of the law against insulting the president have welcomed the government's repeal of the law as a step forward for democracy. Activists said the decision would allow people to freely criticize the presidency and provide checks and balances and constructive criticism in line with the freedom of expression under Zambia's Bill of Rights. The leader of the opposition National Democratic Party, Saboy Imboela, who has been arrested multiple times under the defamation law, says he welcomed the repeal of the law. She, however, urged Zambians to exercise caution, noting that the existence of the cybersecurity laws was a concern as they continued to restrict freedom of expression. The death toll from a gas tanker blast in Johannesburg, South Africa on Christmas Eve has climbed to 27, according to a Reuters report quoting the Provincial Health Department. The explosion in the city's Boksburg suburb last week Saturday tore the roof of the emergency department at the Tambo Memorial Hospital, destroyed 2 houses, several cars, and injured bystanders up to 500 meters from the scene. Local media reported that the truck driver, who was earlier arrested on suspicion of culpable homicide was released on Wednesday due to lack of evidence. This has angered members of the community where the accident occurred. They blame the driver for the accident. This is what some of them had to tell SABC.
This denies us the opportunity of finally getting the truth from the person who was driving, who would have caused this fatal explosion. And what shocks us is to hear these rumors that it would have been released yesterday. And yet, if you look around, you would see the setup. It suggests that this person was also expected from SABS.
When you are a driver, you know the height of your truck, you know even the height of your tanker. So he was supposed to see that.
He entered the bridge at a high speed. That's why he ended. If it was a low speed, he would have hit it slightly, then he could reverse. Or maybe somehow try to make the tires flat so that the trailer can go down a little bit and reverse and report to your controller that I'm in trouble.
South Africans from Buxbub suburb of Johannesburg. From news and current affairs to our human interest segment. This week, we explore what I call the quiet hijab or veil revolution by Gambia's young Muslim women. For the past many decades, the young women in the bustling urban centers of this tiny country were obsessed with Western dress code. Whether they are out at night for social functions like clubbing or at work during the day or just visiting friends, they dress in their short skirts, belly shirts, sleeveless tops, and jean trousers, often supported by expensive fancy artificial hair beautifully sitting on top of their heads. But today, anyone walking in the streets of Banjul and nearby towns will easily notice a phenomenon that wasn't so evident only 5 years ago. The increasing numbers of young women are giving up their short skirts and jean trousers and artificial hair for the hijab, a head and hand covering garment worn by Muslim women as a symbol of modesty and privacy. The majority of Gambians are Muslims, and in this report, I will feature 3 young career Muslim women in Banjul to find out why they go on hijab and what it impacts on their lives.
This is my hijab, I will never remove. Hijab is my pride, it makes my soul improve. It is Allah's law, how can I oppose? Hijab is my way.
My name is Zainab. I am a journalist. I started wearing the veil in late 2014, around November. And I started wearing the veil simply because I feel it is an obligation on me as a Muslim lady that I should cover, if not all, but most parts of my body.
I am Sunfai, working as a technical officer in the Public Utility Regulatory Authority, PURA. It was 2007 I started wearing the hijab. Even though before the hijab thing, I was just a normal girl. I never put on short skirt or anything. I was just so modest in a way. So but one day I was like, okay, I don't put on tight things. I don't put on short things. So I was like, why should I not just get into the hijab and then free myself from this putting a wig or other, fashion thing?
Okay, my name is Aisatu. Okay, I started wearing this hijab for the past 3 years now. It's a religious call for the purpose of Islam. It's indicated in the Quran that all women should cover their outer garments, when going out of doors, for the convenience and everything. So that's why I started wearing this hijab. I was wearing any other thing like trousers, short skirts and stuff, because maybe I was not properly guided, maybe by my parents or whatever. But now, alhamdulillah, with the help of Allah, I have started wearing this hijab and I love doing it.
Wearing hijab, especially in other parts of the world, can spark some strange reactions. This is mainly as a result of the fear and stereotypes associated with Islam and Muslims. People in even Islam-dominated and religious tolerant Gambia are aware of these stereotypes. So when Zainab and Aisatu decided to wear the hijab, some of their loved ones didn't get it.
Most of my friends and family didn't take it serious. They didn't think I meant it. Maybe they just thought I was joking or I just put it on to make fun or something like that. But as time went by, they saw me, in it and then loving it and then changing my dress code entirely. That is when they knew that I actually meant it, especially the day that I had to like clear my wardrobe. I pulled down everything, ranging from dresses, skirts, short skirts, trousers. I pulled down everything and gave
What did
them.
you do with them?
I gave them away. I just gave them to somebody to give. I didn't even know who have them right now. I just packed them in one big bag and then gave it to somebody to just take it away from me.
My mom especially was not that, comfortable with me doing the hijab. And my friends were calling my mom when they saw me wearing the hijab. Some of my childhood friends calling my mom, telling her that, did you really see Aisa two houses dressing nowadays? They were like surprised because when they know me, they know I'm so fashionable, into fashion and all that. I wear short skirts and everything. So they were just shocked at first. But later, when they see me, struggling, doing it, time was going and I was still doing it, they just accept it.
Wearing hijab for the purpose of Islam might sound like just changing clothes from one to the other, but it's not. It also requires submitting yourself to Allah by following the teachings of Islam. This means giving up on some of the things you used to do, and when you are surrounded by long-time friends with the old habit, it can be a bit tricky. Zainab and Sun explains how they relate to other people since they started wearing the hijab.
I'm the only person that wears the hijab amongst all my friends. So, it's normal. My relationship with them is still the same. Even though I try to advise them that, they also have to start wearing the hijab, and try to express how I feel after, putting on the hijab. But other than that, it hasn't changed any relationship with anybody. Everything stays the same. And my life changes just a little bit, but I'm okay.
When people put on hijab, people give you respect more because they think that when you put it on, it's like you're a good person. That's how they identify you. So you earn respect from your society, from the society, from your family, from even your friends. Sometimes they admire you. They think that you're doing better than them. I had some weird experience when I was in Venezuela because with the hijab, I was there studying. And then you can imagine the city I was living, I was the only one with hijab. So it was so strange to them. And sometimes I found it very uncomfortable because wherever I go, people will be like, ¿Por qué pones? Like in Spanish, why do I always have to put on this thing when my other girls are not putting it? I was like, this is my religion. And they had to debate with me because you have other girls, the same religions, and they're not putting on the hijab.
The sight of young women in the Gambia wearing the hijab was previously confined to rural areas, but it has now become increasingly common all over the country. There has even been a hijab revolution from the time Zainab, Sun, and Aisatu first went into it.
I think there are two things here. There are a lot of girls that are wearing the hijab because they feel like it's a religious obligation. Girls like myself, but I have seen girls also that I had conversations with who are simply wearing the hijab because of the dress. I've realized that, many fashion designers are into, hijab wears.
Woman body is something that have to be private.
Maybe it's a revolution, as you call it. Some are doing it for fashion. We have different purposes, some just follow the trend. But alhamdulillah, when we see so many people doing it, it's just a good thing, and I appreciate it.
A young Gambian woman ending that report about the country's quiet hijab revolution. Now time for sports. Africa's World Cup history makers, Morocco, have threatened to boycott the African National Championship next month in Algeria over flight arrangement issues. In a letter to the African Union earlier this week, the Moroccan Football Federation said its team would only compete if there is a direct flight from the Moroccan capital Rabat to the Algerian city of Constantine, where Morocco's games are to be played. Moroccan military and commercial aircraft have been barred from Algerian airspace since the two neighbors severed diplomatic ties last year. At the heart of the dispute lies the contested Western Sahara, a territory that Morocco annexed in 1975 and that Algeria-backed Sahrawis have long sought independence for. The African Nations Championship involves players for local clubs and runs from January 13 to February 4. Morocco is scheduled to play against Sudan, Madagascar, and Ghana in the group stage. Now, time for our special guest segment. This week, we meet Fadi Hoshimi, a Gambian businessman who turned a cocoa seedling gift that he didn't think much of for many years into the first made in Gambia chocolate bar.
Well, right now we have settled on 4 recipes that are being sold. The 70% dark chocolate, then we have the 70% dark with mint, and then we have the milk chocolate and the white chocolate. And the reason we have settled only for 4 because it does take a while to create a recipe. Once you test a recipe, you need to have a whole survey. You need to give it out to people to try it and listen to them. I'll give you an example right now. We're actually testing dark chocolate with sea salt, right? It's been about 2-3 months and we're playing around with the formula and having feedback from different customers, but again, you can never get it perfect. Why? Because the taste buds are different. So some people will tell you, well, this is too salty, or some people will say, no, we need to add more salt. So it takes a while to get to some kind of recipe, and that's why we have settled for the 4 recipes as of now.
And your brand is called FH Bites.
Correct. This brand started really from the days I was in my kitchen, just as for fun. I said, okay, let me just call it FH. FH is my initials, Fadi Hoshaimi, and Bites as in, chocolate bites. So I thought, okay, let's just call it FH Bites. People got used to the name. And as you know, I mean, we eventually started a Facebook page and called it FH Bites. We had the interviews globally. You were the first one who interviewed me in 2019, I think. So I thank you for that.
And then how and where do you commercialize your chocolate brand, your bars?
For now, it's in Gambia only. And we have right now put it in, I would say 6 to 7 supermarkets. We're actually trying to penetrate the hotels. Because we believe that a lot of foreigners coming to Gambia would enjoy buying local produce and even taking it back with them. And this is high quality chocolate. I think you've tried that before and you can testify to that. So we're not just doing any chocolate. What we're doing is organic, healthy chocolate from bean to bar, meaning we do the whole process from the cocoa beans all the way to the chocolate bar. So it's a lot of work, but a lot of passion. It's really, really fun and exciting.
I've tried it, and then, of course, very yummy. I was very, very impressed. But Fadi, let's go back to where this whole chocolate story started. Around 2007, a Ghanaian friend who returned from Ghana gave you a cocoa seedling as a gift from home. What happened next?
It was John Adai. John Adai was one of our employees. He even retired a few years ago. We are still in contact. Very nice gentleman. Around, I forgot the year, maybe as you said, 2007 or so, he gave me a cocoa plant from Ghana as a gift. And at that time, I had no clue what this was. No one ever thought of chocolate in Gambia, not even cocoa. So I just planted it among my many trees in the garden. I'm like, okay, it's good to have exotic stuff from all over the world. And we always water the garden. And eventually, a couple of years down the road, it had some fruit, what we call cocoa pods. And we opened the fruit up. And if you open it up, you can't really do much with it. It's like kaba, like it's a bean, and then it's surrounded with this white, sweet pulp. So all you can do is just suck on the pulp. But then the bean itself, you cannot do much with it unless you process it into chocolate. But at that time, my mind never went to chocolate. So the years passed, actually, and we forgot about this tree completely until 2018. I was about to cut the tree down because I thought, well, it's not doing much. And luckily, I did not. I thought of, researching this tree more, Googling it, what's happening in Ghana. And then I came across the statistics that say that 70% of the world's chocolate comes from West African cocoa. And when I read that, I'm like, wow, this is crazy. This tree is in my garden, happy. It's producing fruit all year round. It's not seasonal. So then my interest grew, of course. And when you're curious, you can, do a lot of things. I was researching, Googling, and then this crazy idea came to my mind of making actually chocolate from it, because I wanted to make use of this cocoa tree. And that was Valentine's, I remember, and I thought, okay, let me be romantic and surprise my wife with a homemade chocolate bar.
Yeah, that was a rehearsal for you. How did that go?
That was funny and crazy. It was a crazy one. I mean, I had no machines, I had no tools, I didn't know what I was doing. To cut it short, I managed to get something that looked like chocolate. I made it look like a heart. It tasted like rubbish. I mean, it was so bad.
So you didn't like it?
Oh no, I didn't like it even. But at least the effort, it was romantic. So I earned points for my wife. But after that, I was very curious and intrigued. The fact that I could at least move a cocoa bean into something that looked like chocolate. If you know me well, you know I'm a perfectionist. I don't give up. So every few months, when I had a few ripe cocoa pods on the tree, once they start turning yellow, you can take them off and use them. So I would take a few off and do the whole process all over again. And it's a long process. I mean, I'll give you the brief steps. Basically, you take the cocoa beans out of the pod. Then these cocoa beans, you have to ferment them for 5 days. And that happens in a very hot, humid environment, such as let's say a cooler box or a box under the sun. And then after 5 days of fermentation, you have to dry them. And that's another 5 days. And once you do that, then you have your beans that people who make chocolate, or chocolatiers, that's what they use. So when you take it home, now you're gonna first step is to roast. You gotta roast the beans. After roasting, you peel the beans, and what you're left with is the cocoa nib. And that cocoa nib is the final product you use in your recipe. And depending on your recipe, of course, you add your other ingredients, whether it's sugar, whether it's milk, whatever you want to add. But then you need a grinder. There's a special grinder called a whetstone grinder. And at the beginning, I didn't have that. But eventually, I bought myself a small grinder, and I started making chocolate.
And the first set of people who tasted your chocolate and gave you feedback were your friends.
Yes, I mean, it was friends, it was family. Some people were very honest and told me that it wasn't nice. And some people gave me good feedback. They will tell me, Fadi, look, you got to do this, you got to do that. I'm tasting this, I'm tasting that. Some people, of course, would lie to you. They will tell you it's nice, it's okay. But you have to listen. And that's the rule I've learned in life, in business, and everything you do. Just listen. And listen, not to react, just listen. And through that listening, I would improve on the process every time I did it. So every couple of months, I will do the whole thing all over again, get a few bars out, and have people try. And it took 2.5 years, actually. It took me 2.5 years for someone to finally say, can I have one more? And that was the turning point for me. I got to a level of a chocolate that was really enjoyed by people, to the point where they wanted more. And that in business, in entrepreneurship, is key when your customers want more of your product.
That's where you decided to commercialize it.
Yeah, but I mean, keep in mind, I was still doing this in my kitchen at home at 5 a.m. or 10 o'clock at night. I mean, this is not my main business. I don't live from the chocolate. Chocolate started as a crazy hobby and an adventure and a passion.
Right.
So, and I continued doing that in the house, in the kitchen, and I was wrapping them myself. I was doing everything myself. And the first trial was to put it at one of the supermarkets in Gambia, at Marun's, and to see the reaction. And every month he will order a few more, and eventually it increased and increased. And I thought, okay, well, if people are buying it again and again, that means they like it. But the bottom line is, I just never gave up. And people ask me why I do this. I don't have to do it. I do it first because it's a great feeling. Making chocolate is pure art, it's pure passion. And as long as I have that feeling, I will continue to make healthy chocolate for me, my family, for whoever wants to, buy it. But the second reason I'm doing this is also to help Gambia. When you talk about cocoa is a crop that is a gold mine for Africa, for West Africa especially. I mean, 70%, 70, comes from West Africa. Imagine the value of that. So why can't Gambia get a little cut of that?
That was Fadi Hoshimi, our special guest and a Gambian businessman behind the first made in the Gambia chocolate bar. And with that, we come to the end of this week's edition of your Week in Review program, Africa This Week, on Home Digital 99.9 FM. I'm your producer and presenter, Sheriff Bojang Jr. Thanks for your company, and we'll be back the same time next week for another edition of the program. Until then, have a very happy and prosperous New Year. Africa This Week, a new program that features and analyzes all the top news and events that took place across the continent during the week, is coming on Home Digital FM. The 1 hour Week in Review program will exhibit experts and commentators to look back on the news of the past 7 days and break down stories and issues across Africa that everyone is talking about. Africa This Week will feature Guest of the Week and engage people at the center of every key news, every story, in the best interactive, entertaining and informative way possible. Africa This Week on Home Digital FM 99.9 every Saturday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. starting from next Saturday, October 22nd. Africa This Week with me, Sheriff Bojang Jr. See you there.
FM 99.9 in Brikama Town. For all the businessmen and women, move out of the darkness, follow the light. Come sell your business with us today. Home Digital FM, let your customers know what you're offering. Be on top of your competitors. Home Digital FM, we will help you stand out. Come advertise with us today for all your businesses. We offer live program coverage both on Facebook Live and on the radio. Exos to sell your products and services. The media is in control. Tell your customers when, where, and how to meet you through Home Digital FM. Don't worry. Do your business. We will sell you out. Call us today on 734-3125 or 200-5770, 620-1413, 766-8394. Home Digital FM. Follow the light.